Okay, the webinar is being started and I'm sharing the live stream on Facebook now.
Right.
Okay, Mel Rapozo, we are live on Facebook.
Aloha. Right, and I'm gonna hit the share button. Boom.
And we going? All good?
We're live, bro. We are live. We are
Everybody,
live.
aloha, good evening. Look forward to a great discussion tonight.
All right, here we go. All right, they are pouring in. They are pouring in, Ikaika.
Aloha, everybody, for coming by. Looking forward to a great discussion with my friend and former colleague from the Kauaʻi County Council, Mel Rapozo, as we have the opportunity tonight to discuss term limits as we believe they should apply to state lawmakers and the state sunshine law that we likewise should apply to state lawmakers. Now, Mel, with the state sunshine law, of course, the law was created by state lawmakers to apply to every single board and commission, in addition to county councils, but that they conveniently exempted themselves from. So as we start the discussion with term limits and sunshine law, Mel, can you give your manao?
Yeah, I don't know where you want to start, Ikaika. First of all, thank you for having me on tonight, buddy. Appreciate the invite. Great topics. Topics that I believe are very important. And I think, you know, for Kauai, I started my career in the county council back in 2002, where there were no term limits, and then term limits got initiated shortly after that. So now we do. We have term limits here on Kauai for county councils. It's for 2-year terms. So 8 years, after serving 8 years, you must step down for a term, and then you can run again. It doesn't stop you from running for any other office. So you could run for mayor, state house, state senate, lieutenant governor, governor. But you just cannot run for a 5th consecutive term for council here on Kauai. Oahu, it's a little different, but it's the same concept. What yours are what? 2 4-year terms, correct?
Right, because the Honolulu City Council has 4-year terms, so it's
Right.
2 4-year terms, consecutive.
So the whole concept of term limits was, again, there's many, and we'll get into the sunshine law later. Term limits was established because the people, right? The people that the councils serve felt that they wanted to see change. They wanted to see new ideas. They wanted to be able to have some new blood, if you will, into the county councils. So as times change, right? Things change in the counties. And so term limits were proposed, I believe, a couple of times. It never passed. It has to go on the ballot. It has to go out in the general election, and it has to be passed by the voters. But it did finally pass. And since then, we've seen council members have to leave their seat, like myself, because they had expired, their 4th term had expired. A long time ago, when I first got into the county council, when term limits were brought up, Ikaika, and I know we had this discussion in the past, I did not support term limits for county councils because the old school, my mentors taught me, that the term limit is on the ballots. It's at the election day. If you're doing a good job, you should stay. And I believe that. I believe that until actually I left the council when I could no longer run. And I was forced to take that break. A couple of things happened. Number one was I was able to get back to reality and look at issues from the outside and really assess what was going on in the community. The second thing that happened was when we have term limits and council members are forced to leave, it opens up seats for candidates that normally would not run because it's, and you know this, Ikaika, it's very tough to challenge a sitting council member, a sitting House of Representative, a sitting senator. The incumbent's advantage is there, it's real. So a lot of people will not run because they don't believe they have a chance. So and I'll use me as an example. When my term expired, I sat out for 2 years. The following 2 years, everyone assumed that I was going to run again. This was the last election. Everyone assumed that I was going to run again. I was getting calls from prospective council candidates that called me and asked me if I was going to run. I said, why? Why? I mean, if I run, I run. If I don't, I don't. And they told me, he says, Mel, if you run, then I'm not going to run because you're a shoo-in. And I'm not going to run if you and Ross and the others that are going to run, it's going to make it difficult for newcomers to run. And I thought about it and I said, they might be right. And I decided to not run and allow these new people to run. And some got elected. And we have a new council makeup, new ideas. And I think that's how the process should be, so we can get, we can always have these new ideas and actually give people a shot at running and serving their communities.
And like you, Mel, my position on term limits evolved as well. My pop served in the legislature for 20 years. My uncle served in the legislature as well for 20 years. But as you said, your mentors shared with you, my pop always shared with me, term limits come up every 2 years when elections occur. The problem with that, though, Mel, is the benevolent public servants of the past are just that, of the past. Now you get people who build up seniority and create these fiefdoms almost and amass all this power and use it for personal gain. At least that's what I've seen. And those are the discussions that I've had as my campaign has moved across the state. From Kauaʻi to Hawaiʻi Island, people have shared that exact same viewpoint with me. And some have asked me, oh, Ikaika, you have some seasoned elected officials helping you, supporting you. What about those folks? Well, look at Governor Abercrombie, for example. Governor Abercrombie started his career in the State House of Representatives. He served for 2, maybe 3 terms. Then he ran for the state Senate, served for another maybe 3 terms. And then he ran for Congress. And then he ran for the Honolulu City Council. And then he ran for Congress again. My point is, he didn't sit in the state legislature forever. He moved around. And with term limits, that's exactly what would happen. Look at Ann Kobayashi, who I see is on tonight. Aloha, Auntie Ann, good to have you. And honored by Auntie Ann's friendship and support. But Auntie Ann as well served a number of years in the state Senate. On her own accord, she left a comfortable seat in the state Senate and decided to run for Honolulu mayor. Then after that, she served as a cabinet official in a mayoral cabinet, and then herself ran for Honolulu City Council. So my point is, these folks didn't simply sit in the legislature for 20, 30 plus years. amassing all this seniority. I'd also argue, Brother Mel, looking again at someone like Ann Kobayashi, who has a wealth of experience and knowledge. Granted, when you went in front of Ann Kobayashi's Ways and Means Committee or Budget Committee, you better know your stuff. You better have done your homework. You better know what you're talking about. But Mel, we come from an understanding where we don't abuse people who come in front of our committees. We may have disagreements, but we don't abuse people. Mel, you and I, representing the Hawaiʻi State Association of Counties, how many times did we go in front of the legislature, in front of the money committees, asking for support, asking for kokua, for our mutual constituencies, mind you, because the same folks who vote for them or against them vote for us or against us too. And we told, beat it. Not only are we disrespected, the people who elected us are disrespected. I've just come to see that with term limits and this consistent changeover, definitive changeover, would be beneficial for the general public of Hawaii. But more importantly, let's ask the general public how they feel. Put the constitutional amendment on the ballot, let people vote it up or down. Let's see how they feel.
That's the discussion, you see, Ikaika, because how you feel and how I feel are irrelevant. And that's why when I did the pre-show live on my page, I said, you guys get the information and you make your decisions based on what you know, do your due diligence. But you got to remember one thing. Politics, elected office, was never intended to be a career. Never. It was intended to be for people that were willing to stand up and represent their constituents as community service. Unfortunately, what has occurred over the years is people have made this a career. And when you make this your career, then you do whatever it takes to get reelected. And the focus is no longer on doing what's right for the community. It's doing what's needed to get reelected. That is what this is all about. So what happens when people complain all the time, I'm not going to vote, not going to change. People, nothing going to change. They never changed for the last 20 years. Well, the reason we never change is because we never changed the people. See, the mindset is the same. The actions are the same because the people are the same. Now, I enjoyed sitting on a council knowing that as long as I did what my constituents want, I could stay. But when I sat out for the last 4 years and looked at these new council members come in, learning, being, now all of a sudden you got to listen to your constituents. We may not always agree, but it gives the community an opportunity to talk to new policymakers because the old policymakers you tried and they didn't listen. So if you don't change the policymakers, and then things aren't going to change. And I think that is why you cannot look at elected office as a career. You cannot. You got to look at it as community service. You got to look at what you can do to service your community, your constituents in your term and not focus on the next election. The other wonderful thing about term limits, I think, as far as advantage is when you get new people to run, when you get first-time candidates to run, guess what follows them? New voters, right? Because someone might be out there, they don't vote. They're disgusted with the system. They're just tired. But all of a sudden, they find a candidate or a friend that is going to run for the first time. Guess what your friends, that new group of people will do is they're going to go register and they're going to vote to support their friend, their candidate. And that's going to improve the voting percentages for our state across the islands. That is another benefit, I think, that people don't talk about much, but if you haven't voted in your life and all of a sudden your cousin or your neighbor or your guy you work with said, yeah, I'm going to run, guess what? You're going to help them and you're going to vote. So it's going to stimulate the voting. I think that's what the state really needs. We need to get a bigger percentage of people out voting. So that's just one other advantage, I think.
But look at legislative leadership too, though. I mean, term limits have, at least at the Honolulu City Council level, have made it possible for freshman lawmakers to serve in senior positions on the council. Ernie Martin became our city council chair his first 6 months in office. He was our budget chairman when he started his tenure on the Honolulu City Council. Without term limits, neither of those two scenarios would have come to pass that early in Ernie's career. Right now, the Honolulu City Council is led with a freshman chairman, Tommy Waters. Again, what lends those possibilities to becoming reality is term limits. That's really what allows for these freshman lawmakers to be able to serve in these important positions. Ernie Martin went on to serve as one of the longest serving council chairs, if not the longest ever, more than 6 years as council chair. That takes some doing to be able to have your colleagues support you for that long. And as a council chair yourself, Mel, I'm sure you can appreciate that. But to be chosen as a freshman member to serve as council chair, can you imagine now serving in the State House of Representatives or in the State Senate as a freshman? Seeking either of those positions, you get laughed out of the chamber.
Yeah. It allows for newly elected people to have some influence. It really does. Because right now, you know, you get elected to the state legislature, there's a pecking order. And it is what it is. It's reality. There's a pecking order and you play the game or you get nothing, right? That's just how it works. And term limits would change that. We'll get into the disadvantages of term limits as well. But that's one of them, where you could get a younger or a newer term elected official, which would be able to have some influence at the Capitol, simply because of the rotation of the members. The other thing, Ikaika, I'll bring this up, and I know, you know, we two of our friends, you know, I'm not ashamed to call them friends because we were friends, we're colleagues, but I definitely do not condone what those two, the senator and the House of Representatives that just pled guilty to corruption. I don't condone that. But when term limits actually limits the potential of corruption because you're not there long enough.
That's right.
You're not there rooted in your seat. It also makes it doesn't give the lobbyists as much advantages when you have the rotation of people. Right now, and you got, come on, guys, we all know what goes on, right? We see it all the time. And lobbying is not illegal. And but when you have the rotation of members and that flow through on a term limit basis, I mean, we're talking 8 years. It's still a good chunk of time. 8 years before you would have to step away for a term. Mm-hmm. But 8 years is long enough. And anything beyond that, I mean, you create these allegiances with lobbyists, and these allegiances with special interests. And because your focus is not on your constituents, but it's on re-election, that's where it gets a little skewed. So term limits to a certain extent would limit or reduce the chance of corruption and advantages taken by lobbyists. And that's real.
It's absolutely real. But also, Mel, going back to what I was talking about earlier, we had a different type of public servant in Hawaii years ago, before we had term limits. I mean, one of the elected officials that people like to point to is Calvin Say, who's been in office longer than I've been alive. No joke. Seriously, he's been in office longer than I've been alive. So you have some people ask, well, I've been voting for Calvin Say for 40 years. Shouldn't I be able to have him if I want to keep having him serve my community, if I'm happy with his level of service? And to an extent, I can appreciate the argument of those folks who say yes. But again, that's a different caliber of elected official. Calvin Say chaired the finance committee for a number of years. Mel, have you ever, and you know Calvin Say just as well as I do, have you ever heard anybody, folks who disagree with Calvin Say on whatever they may disagree with him on? Do you ever hear any instances of Calvin Say mistreating people?
No,
Calvin Say
absolutely not.
humiliating people in front of his committee?
No.
We've seen it now with the current crop, though, haven't we? You and I have experienced it personally.
Yeah, my butt still hurts, man. My butt still hurts, you know?
That's the difference. We are talking about an entirely different generation, different caliber, different respect level, in so many cases, lack thereof today, that I think just screams out for term limits. And at the very least, our elected officials in this state owe it to the voting public to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot. As a lieutenant governor, that's exactly what I would ask the governor to do. Submit a bill for a constitutional amendment to the state legislature asking Hawaii's voters that very question. Should state legislators be subject to term limits? A maximum of 4 two-year terms for state representatives and a maximum of 2 four-year terms for state senators. And let the people decide, let them have their say.
That's what they did on Kauai, and it didn't pass twice, and on the third, I believe it was the third shot, it passed. Again, at the end of the day, it's the people that's going to decide. The voters are going to decide whether or not this is a good thing or not. We're just trying to share with you our thoughts, because we cannot continue like this. We cannot continue, and I'm sure some feathers are being ruffled right now because, again, some people plan on staying there forever. Now, to your argument, which is a valid one, not your argument, but to the argument about term limits versus good representatives, good legislators out, that is true. That is true. But that doesn't prevent that legislator to run for another office in their district, whether it's at the council level, at the state level, or they could take a break and come back. If they are that good, then they will have an opportunity to serve their communities in another capacity.
And the people will have it back if they're that good.
Yes, it's exactly what I'm saying. So it'll be interesting, and I don't envision that happening in this election. But I'm trying to read some of the questions on here. Does that mean that a politician can take a term break and get elected back in for 2 more terms? Yes, it's exactly what it means. You have to take a break. In some states, like California and Oklahoma, no, you get your term 12 years, I believe it is, in your lifetime. I'm not saying we go that far. What I'm saying is that to the complaints that things never change, and the reason things never change, like I said a little while ago, is because the people don't change. We need to have new ideas. We need to have new, and I saw it with my own eyes because term limits forced me out of office. I saw it, and do I agree with everything that new council? No, but that's the process, and a process that I respect and I trust. And this next term, there'll be 2 more vacant seats in the county council that hopefully more people from the community will run with new ideas and new people, new blood. So that was one of the disadvantages, Ikaika, what you talked about, good people going to be forced to leave. I wanted to, there's also a myth, a myth out there that says, oh, just when you're learning your job, you got to go. Remember now, 8 years is the term limit. 8, count them, 8. what are your thoughts on that? It's like really to learn your job and representing the people. Budget is not easy. I will be honest. Budgets aren't easy, but it doesn't take 8 years to learn the budget and how to process the budget.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
And I would argue if it takes someone 8 years to learn the process, then perhaps they should have never been elected to begin with, if it takes you that long. But another beauty with term limits, though, Mel, you know going in that you have a finite amount of time to get into the office, to learn it, and to deliver for your community. If there's a pre-established term limit, you know going in, it's not going to be possible for you to sit there forever. So you need to have a plan if you want to be effective. You're going to need to go into this with a plan of how you're going to succeed, and how you're going to do the job, and how you're going to produce for your community. Really, with no term limits, that really allows folks to run and, if I win, I'll see what I do when I get there. Because then, so long as you talk a good game, you can continue to get reelected. But with term limits, if you want to ensure that you actually produce something, you've got 8 years for county council members. 8 years. That's it. Then you're out of there. And as you said, Mel, granted, people can ask the community to return to the county council, city council, or run for the state house or the state senate or another office. But it's up to the people, not the candidate, as to whether or not the candidate gets another opportunity to serve.
Yeah.
So if you did a good job and the people feel that you've done a good job, then you have some possibility, at least, to continue your service.
I want to just make a real quick clarification because I saw some posts. When we're talking about the term limits, the 8 years, that's the total time, not an 8-year term. No, we're talking about state senate, 2 4-year terms. So they still would have to run to get reelected, but they could only do that once. They only have 2 elections, 2 terms of 4 years apiece. At the representative level would be similar to the county council level, 4 2-year terms.
Right.
So the terms would not change. The terms would remain the same. It's just the amount of terms that an individual candidate can be elected for. So the maximum would be 8 years, and then they would have to step down, either run for another office or step out for whatever the term length is. If it's a 2-year term, they sit out for 2 years. If it's a 4-year term, they sit out for 4, and they can come back in. And I know that the argument is a very strong one, that it's, and that's what I believe for so many years, Ikaika, was that the term limit should be at the ballot box. But again, we're giving up opportunities for new people to run and get elected, because it's tough. First time I ran back in '98, there were no openings, 7 incumbents. I ran because I was angry. And in the primary, I came number 7. Like I won the primary and I freaked out, like, whoa. In the general, I dropped to number 8, so I did not get elected. But had there been an opening because of a term limit, then I more than likely would have been elected. So you keep the funnel full, and you try to encourage citizens to run and be part of government. So, but again, this discussion is for the community to have, and the decision would be the community's decision.
Agreed. And Mel, I think you would agree too, with the Kauaʻi County Council. It's certainly been this way on the Honolulu City Council. We've had a number of candidates, you and me included, Mel, who've been elected to our councils without serving in the legislature or any other elected office. So you've also had people who have served for the first time in elected office on the county councils. And I think that's another positive that term limits bring. You have people who aren't discouraged by the fact that, oh, I have to run against an incumbent. My chances for success are very limited. I mean, look in the district where Joey Monahan termed out, for example, in Kalihi in Honolulu. You had the two candidates who finished first, ultimately won and finished right behind her second. Two people who've never held elected office before. That's an awesome opportunity, not only for those two candidates, but for the community to get to choose from people who may have otherwise not run for office if they were going to face an incumbent, who had would have had name recognition and experience over them. Another one in District 8. The current incumbent, Brandon Elefante, never served in office before. His predecessor, Breen Harimoto, was a member of the Board of Education. So you've seen a lot of people serve for the first time in elected office at the county council level, and term limits helps to breed that, Mel.
And you don't lose much continuity because of it's not every seat term limits at the same election. I mean, at the same term. So you're going to have veterans, you're going to have longtime veterans. It's just that you're not going to have career politicians.
Right.
And I think that is really the biggest problem that we have. And it's not just at the state level, it's in Congress. And it was like that in the county councils too, until term limits took effect. And I think Kauai has benefited much more from term limits than when we didn't have term limits. And that's just my own personal opinion and observation. And yet I'm a victim of term limits, right? I'm a victim. So you would think that I'd be saying, no. But I'm saying, I think it's time, because as you stated, Ikaika, correctly, that times have changed. We're in a new generation. We're in a new time. More people are engaging and more people are paying attention to what's going on.
It also makes for exciting political contests too for the voters. If we had term limits, I think you would have city council members, county council members terming out of office who may run for a state Senate seat, possibly occupied by an incumbent or not, state house seat, possibly occupied by an incumbent or not. You'd also have state legislators who are terming out of office, running from the House to the Senate to the House, possibly the county councils, the city council. But you would have a lot of movement. And while you may have people who certainly could have the benefit of name recognition trying to move from one office to another, they wouldn't always have the benefit of incumbency behind them as they're running for re-election. They'd be running for election to a new office. And that's a huge difference. Even if you're someone who has name recognition now, and I think you can attest to this, running for an office, not as an incumbent, but for a new office is a whole nother challenge.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's not easy. I respect every single soul that decides to run for public office. It's not easy. I just saw a comment. Is this live just to push term limits? We're not pushing term limits. These are two guys that lived through term limits and are sharing our mana'o on term limits. We're also going to be talking about the Sunshine Law. Might be a great segue because we do, hopefully have some time for some questions. But
there was one question that I saw from the field asking how the process to initiate term limits comes about. The process to initiate term limits would be via constitutional amendment or Con-Am. So from the executive branch of government, it could originate from the executive branch of government. This is how I would propose to do it, where the governor and the lieutenant governor, when they submit their package of bills to the legislature next year, included in that package of bills is a constitutional amendment question to put that question on the ballot and give voters an opportunity to amend the state constitution. That's how this particular question would be answered.
and on the counties, obviously we already have term limits, but let's say we wanted to unwind the term limits, it would go to the ballot in the form of a charter amendment. It would be a vote. It would be a vote by the public. So no legislature or no governor or no mayor or no elected official can make this happen. The only way this would happen, whether you're putting in term limits or taking out term limits, would be through a vote by the voters.
That's right.
Which is a good thing. Which is a good thing, because it should always be what the, and that's why it's important to vote, right? You don't want the minority of people, you know, the voters, which tend to be less than majority, dictating what happens in your communities or in your state. You want to get as many people out to vote as possible. And again, I go back to what I said earlier, is that term limits would really create new candidates, first-time candidates, and with them would come new voters. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Sunshine Law.
Now shifting
Ikaika.
our discussion to the Sunshine Law, Mel. So
As
the
I stated,
Sunshine Law was created by the state legislature that requires, even for a board or commission, including a county council, to hold a meeting, a quorum of members. So for the Honolulu City Council of 9 members, 5 members would need to be present just to have the meeting. And if at any time a board or council loses quorum, the meeting stops. Likewise, not only do all discussions have to take place in public, in an agendaed meeting, all voting has to take place in public, which goes without saying. And all deliberations, all discussions need to take place in public. What happens at the legislature a lot of times is you'll see, for example, in the House Finance Committee or any of the other larger committees, you'll have perhaps just the chair and perhaps joined by the vice chair. So 1 member or 2 members of a 15-person committee who are sitting in committee listening to testimony. And right before a vote starts, a number of committee members will come in to constitute a quorum, and voting will take place. Now, mind you, for all we know, all of these members coming to the meeting just to vote didn't hear any of the discussion. They didn't hear any of the deliberations. So that begs the question, is the voting on the measures at hand in public just a formality? Was the conclusion already decided upon? Who knows? The county councils don't get to do that, nor should they be able to do that. But the irony in all this too, Mel, is it's the state legislature that created the Sunshine Law to begin with and has for years exempted themselves from it.
and it's not just the county councils, it's, as you stated, the boards and commissions, Civil Service Commission, Planning Commission, Police Commission, Fire Commission, all of the commissions, government commissions, all of the government agencies, all of the boards have to abide by the Sunshine Law. And this is what frustrates me. And again, this is, again, from my experience, and we can agree to disagree, but as a council member, as a council chair, as the president of the Hawaii State Association of Counties, which was a body of all 4 counties in the state, we would find out about legislative action that was going to be taken, or a hearing that was going to be happening within the next 24 hours. You see, on the counties, in the counties, or the city of Honolulu, that cannot happen. It is illegal. And in fact, if you violate the Sunshine Law, it is a crime, and it is also, you get removed from office. You cannot do it.
But it's punishable by jail time. It's a misdemeanor.
Absolutely. So, and this was all done. This whole law was created to provide open government and transparency for the public. Because if you were, you live on Kauaʻi, and there was an issue pertaining to an issue that affects you, whether it's a zoning, or it's a new development, you will have a week's notice to prepare testimony or to contact your council members or
That's right.
contact the departments that are going to be, you know, doing this thing. So you have a week, and there will be no discussion amongst the council members. And I can tell you this, on Kauaʻi, that was strictly adhered to. But there is no opportunity for council members to go out and meet with other council members to discuss. Everything has to be done in open, and that is to protect or to have that transparency, so the public is aware of what's going on in their counties. At the state level, what happens is you have these measures that are being talked about individually or in little groups of legislators, but the public has no clue.
Yep.
And they actually will have a briefing or a meeting, or they'll put something out that we'll be having a hearing tomorrow at 2:00 in conference room B. You can submit testimony, but you don't have time to prepare. I remember being on a council and trying to get our staff to go research the item so we can at least provide some halfway decent testimony.
Yep.
But that doesn't happen. So these measures get passed without the public input, without any public engagement, and that is wrong. It's just fundamentally wrong to allow that to happen. So that needs to change. I mean, the Sunshine Law should apply to all levels of government. No one should be allowed to go meet with lobbyists, with a few council members or legislators, or have lunch to discuss an item that shows up on a committee meeting or a briefing. And we saw the result of that just recently with the two legislators. So for the life of me, I know our county council, when I was there, we did a couple of resolutions throughout the 14 years I was there. Not all at one time. No, I had a break. But we submitted resolutions to the state urging them to remove the exemption of the legislature from the Sunshine Law, because we want the state to operate like the county so that the public has the benefit of transparency. Is that too much to ask? Absolutely not.
I would agree, Mel. It's not too much to ask. At the very least, the legislature should subject themselves to the state Sunshine Law for everything, all discussions, save possibly leadership. Because sometimes when you're looking to remove a council chair or Senate president or House Speaker to ensure you have the votes to do it, could take some doing. And that's, for the most part, Mel, as a former council chair yourself, I'm interested to get your take on this, really an internal matter when you're talking about the leadership makeup of the respective body. But the overall policy business, that's an entirely different matter. All of those discussions should be had in public. And not just for the formality part of voting either, where you can have a committee chair by themselves presiding over a committee, and then as soon as it's time to vote, the rest of the committee shows up and votes without even hearing the arguments and listening to the testimony. Not to mention, Mel, how do you think the folks who took the time to participate in the meeting, whether in person or remotely, to give their testimony, share their monologue, some of these folks even take time off of work, only to possibly feel that, wow, was I even heard?
Yeah.
Anyone even take into account what I said? There's only one person here. I'm sitting here talking to the chair. I prepared testimony for the entire committee, and I only got the chair sitting here in front of me. Really?
Yeah, it's just not a good thing. In fact, because the way the Sunshine Law is structured, you cannot have less than a quorum, right? And so
That's right.
at times we may have a council member on a trip or sick or whatever, so we may be at the bare minimum at a council meeting or a committee meeting, and if someone gets up, you got to stop the meeting, right?
And
But
I
have been.
and so
I have been. Oh, absolutely. It happens a lot. and things happen, right? Life gets in the way. But I remember on a few occasions, there was someone testifying and I really had to pee. I really had to pee.
Eyes turning yellow kind.
Yeah. You're starting to shake already. So I get up from my seat, and as I'm walking away, the speaker or the testifier will say, "Excuse me, am I not interesting to you?" Because they go there to talk to their representative.
That's right.
And ma'am, I'm real sorry, I gotta pee, and I had to pee. But that makes so much sense. You show up again, you take time out of your day, and you get there to an empty room, a couple of people listening, and it just, the biggest problem I have with it is the legislature. The only difference between a legislature and a county council really is that one is state and one is county.
Yep.
The functions of the state legislature mirrors the functions of the county council on a larger scale, because they obviously have a much larger budget. They have more members of the legislature. But the fundamental purpose of the legislature at the state level is no different, no more important than the function of the local county councils. In fact, the local county councils are the ones that are in the faces of our constituents on a daily basis.
That's right.
And they're the ones dealing with the day-to-day of county living. And I don't say this to disrespect the legislature. I'm just saying the functions are the same, just at different levels. So why shouldn't we be complying with the same rules and laws if transparency is important enough at the local level to create a law that requires you to do all of your business in the open? Why wouldn't it apply at the state level? Why shouldn't it? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. The other thing I really gotta clarify is that, because you talked about the internal issues, the Sunshine Law was done well. It's a good law. The problem is it just exempts the legislature, but there's also exemptions in the Sunshine Law for councils to operate, such as claims. If the county is getting sued and we're in litigation, that is allowed to go into executive session where the public is not allowed.
Right.
If you're doing personnel issues, if you're dealing with issues that are, like you mentioned, if you're talking about changing somebody's job on the council, removing them from their seat of leadership, that's a personnel issue. That is exempt from the Sunshine Law and will be done in executive session. Understanding though, when the issue is done, whether it's a lawsuit, if it's a claim, if it's a personnel matter, the minutes from that executive session meeting will be made public once the actions are done and all the legal issues are complete. So it's not forever secret, but it is secret during the time. Medical issues, obviously, executive session. So there's certain requirements that allows you to convene in an executive session or in a private session, but it's very, very tough. And I don't know how you guys did it on Oahu, but whenever we had an issue, it's obvious. Claims.
Same.
That one is a given, right? But there are some. In fact, there was a time where we were looking at disciplining a fellow council member. We checked with the OIP, the Office of Information Practices, and got their legal guidance whether or not that should be done in or out of open session. So there's a lot of opportunities to meet in private, but it's very strict. The whole purpose of that law was to keep the people engaged and with their government. And it happens at the county levels. It doesn't happen at the state. So
I'm hopeful, Mel, that at least in the campaign for lieutenant governor, the state's second highest office, that we can have this discussion. There are two people running for this office who have spent more than 30 years combined in the legislature. To the best of my knowledge, neither ever tried to change this. They feel it works okay. Whether they do, whether they don't, I'm interested in having that public discussion, especially in light of what's happened with two very senior former legislators. We also have running for lieutenant governor two people who've never held elected office before, but are executives in the private sector. Probably frustration is what got them to run to begin with.
Mhm.
So I'm interested to have this discussion with all five of us to get everybody's point of view. But more importantly, I would like a commitment. At the very least, I would like a commitment from people to say, yeah, if elected, I would champion putting this constitutional amendment on the ballot once and for all of term limits, and once and for all, holding the legislature accountable to the Sunshine Law. Or if you don't want to hold the legislature accountable to the Sunshine Law, then why don't you, if any of these folks feel that way, abolish the thing altogether then? I mean, if they feel it doesn't work, how can it be applicable to boards and commissions and some elected officials, but not applicable to other elected officials, in particular the elected officials who created the law to begin with?
Yeah.
Very Orwellian to me. Then you have a class where some elected officials seem to feel that they are more equal than others. That's a problem.
And that is my biggest frustration. And you know this as well as I. The state looks down at the county councils, the legislature, for whatever reason, whatever. They have a session that lasts a few months. Councils don't have a session; they work year round. We deal with the immediate issues of the communities. At some point, I believe that the counties, and that's why I really love local government, because it's boots on the ground.
It is.
And I really like that. I failed to notice that there is a Q&A button down here that I did not click until now. So let me, Midori Trent, if the individual voters don't take it upon themselves to learn more about candidates' success or failure and simply choose by eeny, meeny, miny, moe, how does a candidate have a chance to field their advocacy? Wow. Cool. That's what we talk about. I think we talked about earlier tonight, was that without term limits, you have incumbents, and you have incumbents that stay there for a very long time. And name recognition, exposure, they have it all. And you have this new person that really wants to serve. They may have been born and raised in this area, have lived through the challenges of their respective counties or their state, and want to make a difference. And then all of a sudden it's coming up in election time, and they said, well, I really would like to serve in the legislature. And then you look at the incumbent and you say, oh my God, that guy get, $700,000 in his war chest. Gosh, I get $24.18. How am I going to beat him? Well, the reality is it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. And the incumbent will rely on their name recognition and their exposure and their money, and they lock it up. No one is going to take that seat away unless something drastic happens like we just saw a month ago. So that's exactly the point. One of the advantages of the term limits is you have an opportunity for rotation. You have an opportunity for this to happen. So
Exactly. And imagine, Mel, your state representative is termed out of office, so is going to run for an open state Senate seat. But that state representative now is no longer an incumbent. They're running for an open seat without that label of an incumbent running for re-election. Huge difference. And makes the playing field more level when you have other candidates who may not have held office before. Just makes the process a lot more fair. In regards to the Sunshine Law, I saw another question here asking who exactly is charged with enforcing the Sunshine Law? Great question. The State Office of Information Practices, otherwise known as State OIP, is charged with enforcing the state sunshine law. So that is a state office funded by state dollars, staffed with state employees who are charged with enforcing the state sunshine law. And the office does do that to the best of their ability. It's tough. And as Mel and I have been discussing, not only is this office charged with enforcing the sunshine law on the Kauaʻi County Council, Honolulu City Council, Maui County Council, and Hawaiʻi County Council, that's 4. You also have all of the state boards and commissions, from the State Board of Education to the Board of Land and Natural Resources, to all of the individual county and city and county of Honolulu commissions. All of that comes under the jurisdiction of state OIP. So additionally, if this is going to apply to the state legislature, I also believe, Mel, we government in general, would have to increase the funding and staffing at OIP to do an adequate job.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, again, it's not an easy task, and remember, because they enforce and investigate all the claims of open government. So oftentimes someone will request a public document or request a document from a specific government agency, and they get turned down. And I can honestly tell you, I respect and appreciate the OIP, and I know they work, and I know they're not bought and paid for by the governor, because when COVID started, I had requested a document. I had requested the minutes from their advisory board meetings. I wanted to know who was on their advisory boards, and I got denied. The office of the governor said, sorry. And I filed a complaint with the OIP. And long story short, I got my documents. The OIP directed the governor's office to send those documents to me. Now, that says a lot, because I actually wrote it off. Like, yeah, right, OIP going against the governor. What they did. And so I have utmost respect for that office. They've helped me a lot as a council chair. And it's one of those agencies that take their work seriously. And they all believe in open government. So great resource. What is the process to instigate term limits in House and Senate? I think Ikaika talked about it. It has to go on the ballot, and that is done through hopefully from the executive branch on down to the legislative branch. Also, another issue not addressed relates to the huge percentage of testifiers leaning one way or the other. And if more are against an issue, and yet the issue moves forward, ends up feeling like corruption when the public's voices are not listened to. Maybe not a topic for tonight, but one that smacks of blatant, apparent corruption. I don't know if you want to take a stab at that. I think, and I'll just speak freely, that there's oftentimes on specific issues that there is something that is really called the vocal minority. People are gonna all blow up right now. Mel, you crazy? No, I'm not. There's a vocal minority. If you represent your district, your constituents, and you are out and about in the community, and I've seen it where everybody that came up to testify was for one side, right? They mobilized, they organized, and they came and testified, and that's what you see when you watch the meetings. But when you go in the community as a community. And I was blessed. You too, Ikaika. You know, we're in the community, whether it's football, baseball. We're in the community. We hear from everybody. You know, I rely on what I believe was in the best interest of the communities, and it not necessarily is always that whole thing. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. Well, that's not always true, because in many cases, I'm not saying all, but in many cases, the majority are the silent ones. And if you're a good legislator, you're a good representative, then you should really have a good pulse of your community or the area that you represent.
That's right. And that does happen at times, Mel, where the number of testifiers, the number of communications that your office receives is not necessarily representative of a majority opinion in your community on an issue. Yes, I've had that happen too. You'll have 50 testifiers and 40 are of a particular opinion, and I'll vote the other way. And as I'm leaving the council meeting, one of those 40 come up to me and go, "Hey, brother, what the hell was that? 50 people testified this thing, 40 in support, 10 in opposition, and you vote in opposition. What's wrong with you?" And you got to explain to them. Then likewise, that evening, I'll go to Shima's to go pick up Hokkien and Pupu on my way home. And I'll have somebody tell me, "Hey, brother, I couldn't get to the meeting today. I don't know how the testimony went. But from what I read in my ohana, we think that bill was horrible." Well, that person was just in a minority, unbeknownst to them even. But I've had that happen a number of times. And I've had people call me after the fact to tell me, "Hey, Ikaika, I know only 10 people came to testify in opposition. I would have come, my cousin would have come, my wife would have come, my son-in-law would have come." Brother, I work 3 jobs, all of them work too. There's no way we were getting down to Honolulu. And I'm sorry, I couldn't even get the time to send you an email. But understand, just because 50 people showed up, please take into consideration that doesn't necessarily mean that the majority who showed up are right or of a majority position of the entire community. So we have that too. We have that.
I think it happens at all levels, you know, and it's frustrating at times. It's yeah, I've had people wait outside by my truck, you know, how dare you? You know, how dare you? Didn't you hear the testimony? I did. I also read the 400 pages of testimony that came from people who cannot come in or who's afraid to testify because they're afraid of retribution or they're afraid of all these, you know, I mean, some of these issues get so contested. And again, you know, it goes back to what I'm saying, what I was saying earlier, is that if you don't change up the members, if you don't change up the people, and if they are fixated on a specific way of writing or making policy, then it's not going to change. And it's amazing what 1 or 2 new people on any board or commission or council or legislature, just because they will speak up.
That's right.
And they will create the discussion. This whole thing we're having tonight is a discussion. That's what it is. We're not trying to force anybody. This thing is not even on the table yet. May not even be on the table, but it's how can we get, I watched a YouTube video today of a guy that was basically saying, how can we get everybody back to the table speaking in a way without the hatred? How after COVID, you know, so much division, hate, downright hate. But how can we have this discussion again and come back and agree to disagree and not hate each other for it? That's going to be the task for all new elected officials, all new citizens of our wonderful state. They're going to have to let go and get to that place where we can all communicate in a way that's not hateful or hurtful. So,
and we're also going to hear, Mel, regarding the Sunshine Law from some state legislators' point of view. Well, we have a 60-day legislative session, and we have to get through that legislative session. So that would impede progress in getting through the session expeditiously. Well, I would also point out that the 60-day legislative session is a state constitutional requirement that could also be changed through a constitutional amendment. All of this is subject to change via constitutional amendment. I'm absolutely okay with discussing it all, Mel. And from my conversation that I've had, again, with people from Hawaii Island to Kauaʻi and in between, voters are willing and ready to have that discussion. It's time.
it is past that time, my friend. And you know, the con, do we really need to turn the Constitution upside down? You know, as things change, Hawaii is not the same Hawaii we had 20 years ago or 10 years ago. It's a different place. It's a different time. Some of our policies and practices need to be, is the length of the session. Is 60 days enough?
Yes.
You know, when you look at the budget size when they created the 60-day session to the budget amount now, to the different problems that our state faces, right? Because we're doing the same things over and over and over. I saw a post today about Kauaʻi, that the state has declared that a top priority to clean up Kauaʻi. And are we frozen?
I can hear you.
No, I can hear you, but I'm getting a comment that we're frozen, and I'm looking at my phone and it looks like we're frozen.
You were frozen for a little while.
Okay. Anyway, it was a priority that the cleaning of Kauaʻi is a top priority. It looks like we're frozen, bro.
Oh, man. Okay.
Anyway,
Ah,
it might be a sign.
Is there any refreshing I need to do on my end?
I don't think you can refresh. You would have to exit and start up again.
Hmm.
and that
Let
would
me
kill it.
let me double check to see what it looks like.
Okay, we're back. Anyway, as I was saying, Jeffrey says must be the Russians. You know, there's always Facebook froze. Okay, it's probably a Facebook thing. All right. So anyway, as I was saying, and this will probably be my last comment because I see it's 7:36. But so there was a post about Kauaʻi and the fact that we had put in $200 million at some point, maybe more, to clean Kauaʻi and restore Kauaʻi. And the state's calling it a top priority, but they don't have funding. So I posted, I said, you know, it's not states, it's not a top priority if you cannot find the funding to go clean up an island from unexploded ordnance. It's not a priority if you are throwing $350 million to a new stadium, to a stadium district. Not that I don't support it, I'm just saying when you're looking at priorities. So I put the analogy in my post. If you had a home with a leaky roof, that's a priority. And you tell your family, you call your bank, you said, this is a priority, I gotta fix my roof. And instead of using the money to fix your roof, you go buy a brand new car. The reality is that leaky roof was never a priority. Getting the new car was. And that's the way I look at this state. It's you're trying to convince the people that you care about Kauaʻi and you care about, and that's the way I look at getting it clean. You're trying to, oh my gosh.
Oh, what happened there?
I don't know. I heard myself.
Sorry, that was me. I'm sorry.
And it's frightening. So you want the people to believe that it's a top priority, but it really isn't. It's never a money issue, Ikaika. And you know this very well. We've worked on projects together for statewide projects for our counties together to know this. It's never a funding issue, it's a priority issue. If it's a priority, you fund it, plain and simple. That was my vent, bro. That was my vent for the night.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us this evening. Thank you, folks, for spending part of your evening with us. My friend Mel, always a pleasure, brother, and really appreciate you lending your experiences of being subject to a term-limited office yourself and sharing with us the frustrations that we've had to work with in trying to work with some of our colleagues in different levels of government. And both of us sharing the opinion that if all of us are subject to the same rules, term limits, the same laws, the Sunshine Law, it would make for a much better system for our electorate.
I cannot disagree with that, my friend. It was one that always, it's one of those issues that it always concerned me, always bothered me. But in the political arena, that's one of the taboo topics, right? You know this, Ikaika. Like I said, man, we'll be real tonight. That's the taboo topics. Don't bring it up. Don't bring it up. Because it's going to affect a lot of state legislators if it should pass. At this point, really, I think we need to create an environment that is open
That's
for
right.
our people. We need to do that. And if changes are made, then it needs to benefit the majority of the people in our state. And I personally, and this will be my last comment, I personally think term limits is a way to do that. And the Sunshine Law has to be amended. It has to be amended. We need to include the people in not just our county discussions, but the state discussions as well. Thank
Exactly.
you for allowing me, bro. Appreciate you, man. I wish you the best in your election. Ikaika, you're a good guy, bro. That's all I got to say.
Mahalo again, brother. Colleagues, yes, we've been, but friends, we will always be, Brother Mel. I've always appreciated your friendship and just as much your honesty, my brother. Before we head out, Kauaʻi's own Mele Apana sends a shout out and in aloha to you and the people of Kauaʻi, Brother Mel. She asked me to give you and the Kauaʻi folks her aloha.
Kauai girl, bro.
Yes.
Kauai girl. I love that woman with all my heart.
She loves you and the people of Kauaʻi as well. Mahalo again for spending some time with us this evening. Look forward to catching up again soon. Aloha.
Aloha.